I still check the locks on a door that isn't there anymore, 3 times, every night, before I let myself fall asleep. My girlfriend noticed it about a month after I quit. She asked if I was okay, and I said yes, because there wasn't really a way to explain what I was actually checking for. I want to say I know exactly when it started. I don't. That's the part that bothers me most. Looking back, not the thing itself, but how long it took me to notice anything was wrong. I'd taken the job in March. A friend from my old gym mentioned a security company hiring night guards for retail sites. No experience needed, decent pay for basically sitting somewhere and being awake. I was between things at the time. Not unemployed exactly, just underemployed, picking up freelance editing work that paid late and paid little. The idea of $12 an hour to sit in a building and watch nothing happen sounded, honestly, like a vacation. The interview was over the phone. A man named Reyes, who I never met in person, asked me 3 questions. Could I stay awake for 8 hours? Did I have a car? Was I comfortable being alone? I said yes to all 3, without really thinking about the third one. The site was a strip mall on the edge of town, the kind with a nail salon, a tax place open only in spring, and one big anchor store that took up half the building. The anchor store was the one I'd be guarding. It was called Carro's. I want to be precise about that because for a while I genuinely thought I'd misheard it or misspelled it in my head, and I went back later and checked the badge they gave me. Carro's, with the apostrophe. I never asked what it sold. That's the first detail that should have meant something to me and didn't. I don't know what I assumed. Furniture maybe, because of the size. Appliances. Something boring enough that nobody had bothered to tell me, and boring enough that I hadn't thought to ask. My first shift. Reyes met me in the parking lot to hand off keys and a badge. It was already dark, October dark, the kind that comes down fast and doesn't announce itself. He was younger than I expected from his voice, maybe 30, wearing a polo with no logo on it. He walked me through the side entrance, not the customer doors, which were dark and gated, and showed me the guard desk near the loading dock. Rounds every 2 hours, he said. Walk the floor, check the doors, sign the sheet. Don't go in the stockroom unless something's actually wrong. Camera feeds on the tablet, but half of them don't work, so don't worry about that too much. I asked him what I was supposed to be watching for. He looked at me for a second like the question hadn't occurred to him before. Nothing's ever happened, he said. Just be here. I want to be fair to my own memory and say that this didn't strike me as strange at the time. It felt like the kind of thing a tired manager says to a new hire on a Tuesday night. I signed something, he left, and I was alone in a dark store for the first time. The thing about the floor of Carro's, and I didn't clock this until probably my 4th or 5th shift, is that I never actually saw what it sold. The shelving was there, rows of it, going back into shadow further than the flashlight on my phone could really reach, but the shelves themselves were mostly bare. Not empty. There were boxes on some of them, shrink-wrapped, unlabeled on the outside in any way I could read in low light. I told myself it was overstock, off-season inventory, the kind of thing you'd see in any big retail floor at night when the displays were broken down. I did my rounds. I walked the perimeter, checked the doors, came back to the desk, ate the sandwich I'd brought, scrolled my phone until the signal dropped, which it did most nights somewhere around 11, and came back around 1 or 2 in the morning. Whole shifts went by, where the most interesting thing that happened was a vending machine in the break room rejecting my dollar 4 times in a row. I'm telling you this part in detail because I think it matters that nothing was wrong for a long time. I don't want this to sound like a story where the narrator is too dumb to notice an obvious problem on day 1. There wasn't an obvious problem on day 1. There were just very small things, spaced far enough apart that each one resolved itself before the next one arrived, and I never had reason to add them together. The first thing, and I only remember this because I wrote it down for my own timesheet, not because it scared me, was that the delivery truck came on a Tuesday at 3 a.m., which Reyes hadn't told me to expect. I heard it back the dock and went to check, because that was, supposedly, the one actual job I had. Two guys in plain grey jumpsuits unloaded maybe a dozen boxes, same as the ones already on the shelves. Didn't say much to me, had me sign a clipboard I don't remember the company name on, and left. I assumed I'd missed an email. I didn't think about it again until much later, when I tried to find that delivery company online, and couldn't. The second thing was smaller. There was a manager's office at the back of the store, door always locked, and one night, around week 3, the door was open about 4 inches. Not all the way, just enough that I could see a sliver of an empty desk and the corner of a filing cabinet. I didn't go in. Reyes had been clear about that. But I did stand there for a minute, looking at that 4 inches of gap, feeling the kind of low unease you get from a door that should be shut and isn't, the way you'd feel walking past a parked car with its alarm silently flashing. I pulled it shut. It didn't latch. I made a note on the sheet. Nobody ever mentioned it. I want to talk about the customers, because there weren't supposed to be any, and for the first month there weren't. The store was closed at night, obviously. That was the entire premise of the job. But somewhere around the 5th week, I started hearing things in the front of the store that sounded like footsteps on the tile near the registers. Not heavy, not running, just the ordinary scuff of someone walking the way you walk, when you're not in a hurry, and not trying to be quiet either. The first time, I told myself it was the building settling, or the havoc kicking on, which made a thunk through the ducts that could, if you were tired enough, sound almost like a footstep. I did a round. Nothing. I went back to the desk and put it out of my head, the way you put most night shift noises out of your head. Because the alternative is lying awake at a desk for 8 hours, convincing yourself the building is haunted. It happened again 2 nights later, and then it happened a third time, close enough to the first 2 that I stopped being able to call it a coincidence in my head, even if I still didn't say the word out loud to anyone. Here's the thing I keep circling back to. The thing that, looking back, was the actual beginning of all of it, even though it seemed at the time like the most boring part of the whole job. I tried to look the store up. This was maybe 6 weeks in. I'd had a slow night. Phone signal was holding for once, and out of nothing more than mild curiosity. What does Caro's even sell? Who owns it? Is there a website? I searched the name. Nothing came up. Not nothing relevant. Nothing at all. No website, no reviews, no listing on any of the map apps, not even one of those auto-generated business pages that exist for every gas station and laundromat in America, whether the owner asked for it or not. I tried variations of the spelling. I tried the strip mall's address instead, hoping the anchor tenant would show up that way. The address came back to the mall itself, but every business listed at that address was the nail salon, the tax place, a vacant unit, and then a 4th listing for retail, unnamed, which I'd never have found if I hadn't been specifically looking for something to be wrong. I didn't panic about this. I want to be honest about that, because I think if I'd panicked right then, this would be a different, shorter story. Instead, I did what I think most people would do, which is decide it was a paperwork problem. New ownership, pending registration, a business that hadn't gotten around to a website because why would a closed-at-night warehouse-looking store need one? I'd worked enough strange short-term jobs by then to know that absence of information online doesn't mean absence of a real thing. Plenty of real things are badly documented. What I did do, because I am, by nature, the kind of person who needs one piece of confirmation before I'll let a thought go, was ask my girlfriend Priya to drive by during the day, just to look, just so I could stop thinking about it. She did, the following Saturday. She called me that afternoon a little confused, which at first I took for her being confused about directions. "I don't think I found it," she said. "There's a nail place, and the tax office, and then there's a unit that's gated, like permanently gated, with paper over the windows. That's it?" I told her that was the place. I told her the gate was just because they were closed during the day, which I genuinely believed when I said it, because why would a retail store only be open at night? The idea was absurd on its face, except that I worked there 4 nights a week and had never once seen it open during the day either. "There's no sign," she said. "I mean, there's a sign bracket up over the door, but there's nothing in it." I remember laughing this off on the phone. I remember saying something like, "Yeah, they're between signage. It's a whole thing," inventing a kind of mundane bureaucratic delay because the alternative explanation didn't have a shape yet that I was willing to look at directly. I want to skip ahead a little, because not every week had something in it, and I don't want to make this sound more constant than it was. There were stretches, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where the job was just a job. I did rounds. I got bored. I ate sandwiches in a break room with a vending machine that hated my dollar bills. I started to relax into the strangeness of the gaps, the way you relax into the unexplained quirks of any job after enough time. The broken light in the 3rd stall, the manager who never answers email until Friday. Caro's not existing online became, in my head, just one more of those quirks. A funny thing to mention at parties, not a warning. Then came the night with the radio. There was an old radio at the guard desk, the kind that took batteries and looked like it had been there since the building was built, tuned to a local talk station that mostly played out infomercials after midnight. I'd never turned it on. It wasn't mine, and frankly it looked filthy. But one night in early December, I came back from my 11 o'clock round, and it was on. Low volume, mid-sentence, some host talking about weather coming in from the coast. I hadn't turned it on. I was certain of that, the way you're certain of very few things at 1 in the morning, but certain nonetheless. I checked the desk drawer for the spare batteries, thinking maybe it had some kind of fault, a short that triggered power randomly. But the batteries were the originals, swollen slightly at one end the way old batteries get. Definitely not fresh. Definitely not the kind of thing that powers on by itself after sitting dead for who knows how long. I turned it off. I sat there for a while looking at it. I did not call Reyes, because what would I have said? The radio turned on, and I did not write it on the timesheet because I had started, without really deciding to, keeping a second, private list of things that did not go on the timesheet. I checked the cameras on the tablet that night more carefully than I usually did. Half the feeds were the grey static Reyes had told me to expect. The other half showed empty aisles, the same still angles I saw every night, except one. The camera covering the far back corner of the stockroom, the one nearest the manager's office, was angled differently than I remembered. Not by much, a few degrees, enough that I could see a sliver of shelving it hadn't shown the week before. I told myself, cameras get bumped. I told myself this several times, in the specific tone you use when you are trying to convince yourself of something you have already, somewhere underneath, stopped believing. After the radio, I started doing something I'm a little embarrassed about now, although I don't think it was unreasonable, given what I'd start noticing. I began leaving small marks, a pencil line on the inside of the stockroom door frame, low, where you wouldn't see it unless you were looking. A coin, balanced on the lip of a shelf near the manager's office. Nothing dramatic, just little proofs, things that would tell me, the next night, whether anything had moved in a space that was supposed to be empty for 8 hours with only me in it. 3 mornings later, the coin was gone. I don't want to oversell this. A coin can fall. A coin can be knocked by a draft, by a cart someone else moved, by my own clumsiness on a round I don't fully remember, because by that point in a shift, I was running on coffee and very little sleep. I want to be fair to all the boring explanations, because most nights, most things, do have boring explanations. But I looked for that coin on the floor under the shelf, in the dust along the base, in the little gap where the shelf met the wall, and I didn't find it. And the pencil mark on the door frame, faint as it was, I'd drawn it myself. I knew its exact shade and angle, had a second line beside it, not crossing it out. Just beside it, roughly parallel, like someone had noticed the first mark, and, instead of erasing it, made their own. I didn't sleep that day. I lay in bed next to Priya, who slept fine, and I went through every rational possibility I could think of and discarded each one slower than the last. I want to tell you what I did next, because I think it's the part where this stopped being something I could keep filing away as a quirk. I called Reyes. It went to voicemail. I'd never actually gotten his voicemail before. Usually he picked up, brief, irritated in the specific way of a man managing more sites than he wanted to. I left a message that I tried to keep calm, said something about wanting to ask about the camera angles, the deliveries, whether there was a daytime staff I should know about. I never got a call back. I tried again 2 days later. The number had been disconnected. This is the part where I have to admit something about myself that I'm not proud of, which is that, instead of quitting, instead of doing the single obviously sane thing, which was to never go back to that building again, I went back. I went back 4 more times. I think part of it was the money, which I genuinely needed. But if I'm honest, a bigger part of it was that I had started to need to know. The not knowing had become worse than whatever the actual answer might be, and I think that's a kind of trap a certain type of person falls into very easily. The kind of person who can't leave a locked door alone even when every part of him is telling him not to open it. The 5th to last shift, I tried the manager's office door. It was unlocked. I want to say I hesitated, and I did, for maybe 30 seconds, standing in front of it with my phone flashlight already on, but I went in. The desk was bare, except for a black landline phone, the cord of which ran into the wall, and, as far as I could tell by feeling along the baseboard, simply ended a few inches in, not connected to anything. The filing cabinet had 2 drawers. One was empty. The other held a single folder, no label, containing employee timesheets, not mine, names I didn't recognize, dates going back almost 2 years before I'd started, signed in handwriting that was, across every single sheet, identical. Same pen pressure, same slight slant, as if one person had filled out years of shifts for people who, as far as I could tell, had never been Reyes, and were not me. I want to describe what I felt standing there, and I genuinely don't have a clean word for it. It wasn't fear exactly, not the kind that makes you run. It was closer to the feeling of realizing, mid-sentence, that you've been mispronouncing a word your entire life, and nobody ever corrected you, except scaled up to something about my entire understanding of where I'd been spending 4 nights a week for 2 months. I left the folder where it was. I left the office. I did not go back to the desk to finish the shift. I sat in my car in the lot until sunrise, which is a thing I'd never done before and have only done that once. And around 6:15, with the grey daylight coming up flat and ordinary over the strip mall, I made myself walk up to the front of the store, the customer entrance, the one I'd never once seen from this side at this hour, to look at it the way a normal person would look at a normal closed store. The gate was down. The windows behind it were papered over, exactly the way Priya had described, except for one gap near the bottom corner where the paper had come loose, curling away from the glass just enough to see through. Behind the glass, the store was empty. Not stocked and dim empty, the way it looked every night when I worked there. Actually empty. Bare concrete floor, no shelving units, no registers, no sign of the rows I'd walked between for 2 months, no trace of the boxes, the dock, the desk, any of it. Just a gutted retail shell with conduit hanging loose from the ceiling and a single sheet of plywood propped against the far wall, the way you'd find in a unit that had been sitting vacant for a long time, waiting for a tenant that hadn't arrived yet. I went back to my car and I called in sick that night, and then I never called again at all, and I never went back, And 3 weeks later, when I tried to call the original number Reyes had used to hire me, not his cell, the company line, it was disconnected too, and the security company's name, when I searched it, returned the same nothing that Caro's had returned months earlier. I never got a final paycheck. I never got a W-2. When tax season came around, I had no employer to report, no business to point to, nothing except 2 months of timesheets I'd filled out myself, in my own handwriting, and a badge with a name on it that, when I finally worked up the nerve to drive past that strip mall again in daylight last spring, belonged to a unit with a for lease sign zip-tied to the same gate I used to walk through every night at 9. I kept the badge. I don't know why. It's in a drawer in my desk, face down. And every so often, usually on nights when the house is quiet in a particular way, I'll think about that desk near the loading dock, the radio that turned itself on, the second pencil line beside my first one, and I'll get up and check the front door, then the back door, then the windows, even though we're on the second floor and nobody could reach them. 3 times, every night. I tell myself it's just a habit left over from the job, something my body does on autopilot, the way you reach for a seatbelt you stopped needing years ago. I tell myself that, and most nights, it's enough to let me fall asleep. But every so often, usually around the time the heating clicks on in the walls with that same low thunk the old ducts at Caro's used to make, I find myself standing very still in the dark, listening for a sound I can't quite name, in a house I've lived in for 3 years, that I am, for just a moment, no longer entirely sure I've ever really seen during the day.